18 months after the humans departed, Ambassador Zexhai found himself leading a desperate mission into the unknown. The Joint Council expedition consisted of 12 ships from 6 different species, all that remained of the once mighty galactic fleet. Their goal was simple: find humanity and convince them to return. The reality was far more complex. Long range. Sensors detect artificial structures ahead, reported Navigation Officer Yilnara from the Andromedan survey vessel. Distance 4 light hours. Configuration unknown. Zexhai studied the displays from his command ship. The expedition had been traveling for 3 weeks beyond the galactic rim, following energy signatures and electromagnetic traces that might lead to human settlements. What they found defied understanding. "Those are not space stations," whispered Science Officer Krental. "They are too large, too perfect." The structures ahead looked like small planets, but their surfaces showed the geometric patterns of artificial construction. Dozens of them hung in space around a young star, each one glowing with the soft light of controlled fusion reactions. "Dyson spheres?" suggested someone over the communication link. "No," Krental replied, running calculations. "More like habitat rings. Each one could support billions of inhabitants." "Billions?" Zexhai felt his heart skip. "How many structures are there?" "I count 47 in this system alone, and sensors detect similar installations in at least 6 neighboring systems." The numbers were staggering. If each habitat supported even a small population, the humans had created space for trillions of beings. Where had all these people come from? "Sir," Communications Officer Dexnor called out urgently. "We are being scanned. Multiple sources, very sophisticated sensors. Hostile?" Admiral Kethvar demanded from the escort cruiser. "Negative. They seem to be analyzing our ships and crew. But there is no weapons lock. No aggressive movement." A new voice came over the intercom, speaking perfect Council standard but with the unmistakable accent of human space. "Galactic Council vessels, you are approaching Terran Federation territory. State your business." Zexhai took a deep breath. "This is Ambassador Zexhai representing the Galactic Council. We request permission to communicate with human leadership regarding mutual cooperation." Silence stretched for long minutes. Then the human voice returned, colder than before. "Permission denied. The Terran Federation has no interest in Council affairs. Please alter course and depart Federation space." "Wait," Zexhai said quickly. "We know about the evacuations. The colonies you have been saving. We want to discuss the crisis affecting the galaxy." Another pause. When the voice returned, it carried a note of curiosity. "Define crisis." "The collapse of trade networks, infrastructure failures, refugee populations, the breakdown of interspecies cooperation." Zexhai tried to keep desperation out of his voice. "We need human expertise to restore order." "Order?" The human spoke the word like it tasted bad. "Is that what you call it?" "The systematic exploitation of primitive species, the slave trade disguised as uplift programs, the resource extraction that destroyed entire ecosystems." Shock rippled through the expedition crews. How much did the humans know? "There have been mistakes," Zexhai admitted. "Errors in judgment. We want to make corrections." "Corrections?" Again, that tone of disgust. "You want us to help you manage the suffering more efficiently." "We want to prevent suffering," Zexhai protested. "Then you should have started 47 years ago when we tried to show you a better way." The communication link crackled with interference, then cleared. A new voice spoke, older and more formal. "Council vessels, this is Director Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation External Affairs Division. Your request for cooperation is noted and denied. However, in the interest of closure, I will meet with one representative to explain our position." Zexhai's hearts raced. Sarah Chen had been the human ambassador who delivered their withdrawal statement. She was alive and apparently in a position of authority. "I will come alone," he offered. "Negative. Bring your full diplomatic team. You will want witnesses for what I'm going to show you." An hour later, Zexhai found himself aboard a human transport vessel unlike anything in the Council archives. The ship moved with impossible smoothness, its drive system completely silent. The corridors were spacious and bright, designed for beings of many different species, and there were many different species aboard. Zexhai saw Andromedans, Zephyrians, and even some Veltar working alongside humans and other beings he did not recognize. They moved with purpose and efficiency, but also with something the Council ships had lost: hope. Director Chen met them in a conference room that overlooked one of the massive habitat structures. She looked older than Zexhai remembered, her hair now silver, but her eyes held the same quiet intelligence that had always made humans so effective as diplomats. "You want to know why we left?" she said without preamble. "The answer is simple. We could not fix you. Fix us?" For 47 years, we tried to reform the council from within. We shared technology, mediated disputes, and quietly prevented conflicts. We thought we could gradually introduce more ethical practices. We were wrong. She gestured to a wall display that showed historical data. In our time as council members, we documented 17 genocides disguised as colonial disasters. 43 species were enslaved through debt manipulation. Over 200 worlds were strip-mined to ecological collapse. And the council leadership knew about all of it. Zexhai felt sick. He had suspected some of these things, but seeing the evidence laid out so clearly was devastating. "We tried to bring these issues to the council's attention," Chen continued. "We were told they were regrettable but necessary for galactic stability. We proposed alternatives. We were ignored. We offered to help develop better solutions. We were dismissed as naive primitives." "So you left," whispered Counselor Kira Esch. "So we stopped enabling evil." Chen's voice hardened. "Every system we maintained, every crisis we prevented, every infrastructure project we supported, it all served to keep a corrupt system running. We realized we were helping the council commit atrocities more efficiently, but the suffering caused by your departure is the natural consequence of the council's own policies. We are not responsible for the collapse. You are." Chen activated another display showing the evacuation operations. "We offered a choice to every oppressed population, every enslaved species, every world facing ecological disaster. Come with us to something better, or stay and face the consequences of council rule." How many chose to leave? Over 2 billion beings so far. Scientists, engineers, artists, farmers, families seeking a better life. We built new worlds for them, gave them citizenship in a true democracy, and asked only that they contribute to the common good. The numbers were staggering. No wonder the council systems were collapsing. Their most capable people were abandoning them for human promises of freedom. "What about those who stayed?" Zexhai asked. "We continued to provide humanitarian aid when possible, medical supplies for plague worlds, evacuation assistance for natural disasters, food for famine regions, but we will not prop up the council's political structure anymore." Admiral Kethvar leaned forward aggressively. "You cannot simply abandon galactic civilization." Chen's expression did not change, but something cold entered her eyes. "Watch us." She stood and walked to the window overlooking the habitat structures. "This is New Geneva Station. Population: 400 million beings from 67 species. They have clean air, abundant food, meaningful work, and democratic representation. They are building art, advancing science, and raising children who will never know the fear of being enslaved or exploited." She turned back to face the delegation. "We have 43 more stations like this. Construction continues on 100 more. Within a generation, we will have space for every being in the galaxy who wants to live free." "And then what?" Kethvar demanded. "You will attack the council? Conquer our worlds?" Chen looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Admiral, you still do not understand. We do not want your worlds. We do not want to conquer anyone. We want to be left alone to build something better." She walked to the door, then paused. "The Federation has one message for the Galactic Council. We are moving beyond the rim to galaxies where we can start fresh. We will not return. We will not interfere with your affairs. And we will not accept refugees or communications from Council species after the transition period ends in 6 months. You are abandoning us," Zexhai said quietly. "No," Chen replied. "We are letting you face the consequences of your choices. It is the kindest thing we can do." The transport returned them to their ships within the hour. As the expedition prepared to depart, Zexhai watched the human installations through his viewport. Somewhere in those gleaming structures, billions of beings were building a new civilization based on cooperation instead of exploitation, and the council would never be invited to join. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away, and the Galactic Council was dying. Zexhai sat alone in the massive council chamber staring at empty seats. Of the original 47 member species, only 12 remained. The others had either collapsed completely or followed mysterious evacuation offers to unknown destinations. The chamber itself was falling apart. The climate control system produced alternating waves of heat and cold. The lights flickered randomly. The communication arrays worked only when they felt like it. Everything the humans had quietly maintained was breaking down and no one knew how to fix it. "Sir?" The voice belonged to his new aide, a young Veltar named Kexnil. Vexkol had disappeared 3 months ago, along with half the station's technical staff. They left behind resignation, letters expressing gratitude for their service, and hopes for a better future. Zexhai suspected they had accepted human evacuation offers. "The emergency session is beginning," Kexnil reported. 7 representatives are present. 7. From a council that once governed trillions of beings across the galaxy. Zexhai made his way to the chamber where the surviving council members sat scattered among hundreds of empty chairs. Speaker Korth was gone, replaced by acting Speaker Vornek, a nervous bureaucrat who jumped at his own shadow. "The situation reports," Vornek announced, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Admiral Kethvar?" The old military commander looked defeated. "The fleet is down to 43 operational vessels. We lost 2 more ships this week to mechanical failures. The crews lack the technical knowledge to perform proper maintenance. Trade Minister Yexgol, galactic commerce has ceased to exist. The few merchant ships still operating demand payment in energy cells or rare metals. Standard council currency is worthless. Scientific advisor Mordek, our research facilities are shutting down one by one. The equipment is too complex to maintain without human technical support. We are losing centuries of scientific knowledge every day." Each report brought worse news. Colonies abandoned, infrastructure crumbling, entire species retreating to their homeworlds and sealing their borders. The great galactic civilization was contracting like a dying star. "There is one more item," Vornek said hesitantly. "Intelligence reports indicate human ships have been spotted in the Omega sector." This was the first human sighting in months. After Director Chen's final meeting with the expedition, humanity had seemingly vanished. Their installations had gone dark. Their ships had stopped appearing on long-range sensors. Even the anonymous rescue messages had stopped arriving. "How many ships?" asked Admiral Kethvar. "Unknown. They appeared briefly on deep space sensors, then vanished again, but the energy signatures were unlike anything we have seen before." Zexhai felt a chill. The humans were still out there, still building, still advancing. While the council collapsed, they were becoming something greater. "We should contact them," suggested Trade Minister Yexgol. "Offer them the council leadership position. Promise them anything they want." "They do not want anything from us," Zexhai replied quietly. "They made that clear." A new alarm sounded, different from the usual emergency signals. The chamber's main display activated, showing an incoming transmission. The source identification read, "Terran Federation Deep Space Command." Vornek's hands shook as he accepted the transmission. Director Chen's face appeared on the screen, but something had changed. She looked younger, healthier. Her eyes held a serenity that Zexhai had never seen before. "Greetings, Galactic Council," she said formally. "This is our final communication. The Terran Federation is beginning its transition to extragalactic space. Our new colonies in the Andromeda Galaxy are ready to receive the last wave of evacuees." Andromeda Galaxy. The humans had traveled 2.5 million light-years to start over. "We are prepared to accept the final group of refugees from Council space," Chen continued. "Any beings who wish to join the Federation should gather at the coordinates being transmitted with this message. Transportation will be provided within 72 hours, Kexanil whispered urgently in Zexhai's ear. "Sir, those coordinates are only 6 hours away by shuttle." "After this final evacuation," Chen said, "all Federation ships will depart Council space permanently. The transport gates we have established will be destroyed to prevent pursuit. This chapter of human history is ending." The transmission paused. Chen's expression softened slightly. "To any council members listening, you were offered many opportunities to choose a better path. You chose power over justice, exploitation over cooperation, fear over hope. We cannot save you from the consequences of those choices, but we do not leave you in anger. We leave you in sadness, hoping that someday your descendants will learn to build something better than what you have created." "Wait," Vornek called out desperately. "We can change. We can reform the council. Give us another chance." But Chen was not finished. We have left automated systems in place to provide basic humanitarian aid for essential functions. Medical supplies for plague worlds, emergency rescue beacons for natural disasters. These systems will operate for 50 years before shutting down permanently. To those who choose to remain in council space, we wish you well. To those who choose to leave, welcome to the future. The transmission ended. Silence filled the chamber. The last offer, the final chance, and most of the council members were too proud or too afraid to take it. Ridiculous, muttered Admiral Kethvar. We built this civilization. We will not abandon it for human promises. What civilization? Zexhai asked quietly. Look around. This is not civilization. This is the grave of one. He stood up from his chair, decision crystallizing in his mind. I am going to the evacuation point. You cannot. Vornek protested. You are a council member. You have duties. My duty is to my people, not to this dying institution. And my people deserve better than what we have built here. Kexnel stepped forward nervously. Sir, if you are going, may I come with you? I have family on the outer colonies. They sent word that conditions are getting worse every day. Zexhai nodded. Anyone who wants a future should come. Admiral Kethvar stood angrily. This is treason. You are abandoning everything our species worked to achieve. No, Zexhai replied, walking toward the exit. I am abandoning everything our species worked to destroy. The shuttle bay was crowded when he arrived. Hundreds of beings from different species lined up at the departure gates. Engineers, scientists, teachers, farmers, families with children. The competent, the hopeful, the ones who still believed in something better. Zexhai recognized many faces. People who had served the council faithfully for years, now walking away from everything they had known. The transport ships that arrived were beautiful. Sleek, elegant vessels that moved with perfect silence. Human crew members worked alongside beings from dozens of species, all wearing the same uniform. Simple, practical clothing marked with the symbol of the Terran Federation. Welcome aboard, said a human officer, her smile genuine and warm. We are honored to have you join us. As the transport lifted away from the station, Zexhai looked back at the council chambers one last time. A few lights still gleamed in the darkness, but most of the structure was already going dark. Within months, it would be a tomb. The journey to the human transport gates took 3 days. During that time, Zexhai talked with other evacuees, learning about the new worlds they were traveling to. Democratic societies where every being had a voice. Clean worlds with abundant resources managed sustainably. Universities where knowledge was shared freely. Art centers where creativity flourished. Most importantly, worlds where children could grow up without fear. The transport gate was unlike anything Zexhai had ever seen. A ring of pure energy hanging in space, large enough for the biggest ships to pass through. Beyond it, sensors detected nothing. The gate led to some place beyond the reach of council technology. Citizens of the Federation, announced the human captain as they approached the gate, welcome to your new home. The ship passed through the energy barrier and space itself seemed to transform. The stars were different here, brighter and more colorful. In the distance, Zexhai could see massive installations that dwarfed anything humanity had built in their home galaxy. This was not just evacuation. This was ascension. On a green world orbiting a golden star, human children played with alien children in parks that stretched to the horizon. In orbital cities, scientists from 100 species worked together on projects that would benefit everyone. In space, construction ships built new worlds while artists designed beautiful sculptures that would float forever in the void. The teacher, a human woman with kind eyes, gestured to her mixed species class. Can anyone tell me why the old Galactic Council failed? A young Veltar raised her hand. Because they forgot that power should serve people, not the other way around. Very good. And what did the founders of our Federation learn from that mistake? An Andromedan child spoke up. That when you have the choice between being right and being kind, you should choose kindness. The teacher smiled. Exactly. That is why we are here, building something new. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let people learn from their own mistakes while you go somewhere better. Back in council space, the last few species struggled to maintain the remnants of their civilization. Some would survive. When humanity ceased talking, that was the day the war began. Ambassador Zethka had grown used to the constant noise. For 3 years, his office on the Galactic Council station had been filled with the endless chatter of human voices coming through the communication systems. Humans talked about everything. They talked about the weather on distant planets, about trade agreements, about their families back home, and about things that made no sense to other species. The Vrex ambassador often complained about it. "They never stop," she would say, her 4 eyes rolling in different directions. "Do they breathe between words?" But Zethka had learned to find it comforting. The human voices meant the galaxy was working as it should. Humans were the great connectors, the species that somehow managed to talk to everyone else. They made deals between enemies, carried messages across vast distances, and always seemed to know what was happening everywhere at once. That morning started like any other. Zethka poured his morning drink and activated his communication console to check the overnight messages. The screen filled with the usual reports from across human space. Trade ships asking for docking permissions, colony governors reporting on crop yields, human diplomats scheduling meetings with dozen different species. Then, at exactly 0847 Standard Galactic Time, it all stopped. The communication channels that carried human voices went silent, not just quiet but completely empty. Zethka checked his equipment thinking something had broken. But the channels were working fine. They just carried no human voices anymore. At first he thought it might be some kind of technical problem in human space. These things happen sometimes. But as the hours passed, the silence grew more disturbing. By midday, not a single human voice had been heard anywhere in the galaxy. Other ambassadors began to notice. The Thraxian delegate came to Zethka's office, her tentacles twitching with worry. "Have you heard anything from the humans today?" "Nothing," Zethka replied. "Not since early this morning." "This is wrong," she said. "Humans don't stop talking, ever." By the end of the day, panic was spreading through the station. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Great Chamber, all asking the same question. Where were the humans? Council Director Vox Prime, a being so old that his species had forgotten its own name, spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. "We have attempted to contact every human settlement, every human ship, every human outpost in known space. None respond to our calls." The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. The Kree delegate stood up, his blue skin pale with fear. "Could they all be dead? Some kind of plague?" "Impossible," said the Altarian representative. "Humans spread across thousands of worlds. No plague could work that fast." "Maybe their communication systems failed," suggested another voice. "All of them, at exactly the same time?" Vox Prime's ancient eyes glowed dimmer. "That seems unlikely." Zethka found himself speaking without meaning to. "What if they chose to stop talking?" The chamber fell silent. The idea seemed impossible. Humans choosing not to talk was like asking the stars to stop shining. But as the days passed, that impossible idea began to seem more real. Scout ships were sent to the edges of human space. They found human vessels, human stations, human colonies, all active, all functioning, all completely silent. The first scout to return was Captain Erix of the Altarian Navy. She stood before the council, her face pale and confused. "They're all there," she reported. "The humans are alive, working, moving about their business. But they won't respond to us. They look right through us as if we don't exist." "Did you try to board their ships?" asked Vox Prime. "We did. Their automated systems guided us away. Politely but firmly. We never saw a human face or heard a human voice." More reports came in over the following weeks. Every scout mission found the same thing. Humans were alive and active, but they had simply stopped communicating with the outside galaxy. They moved through space in their ships, worked in their colonies, and went about their daily lives in complete silence. The economic effects began almost immediately. Humans had been the galaxy's great traders, the species that connected markets across vast distances. With them, silent trade routes that had operated for decades suddenly stopped working. Species that had never talked directly to each other found themselves unable to make basic agreements. The Vrex, who had always complained about human chatter, now begged for someone to contact them. "We have 17 cargo ships full of Altarian crystals that were supposed to go to human buyers," their trade minister explained. "Now we don't know what to do with them." But the economic problems were nothing compared to the fear. Humans had been the galaxy's diplomats, the ones who settled disputes and prevented wars. Without them, old conflicts began to surface again. The Kree and the Santarans stopped talking to each other entirely. The Thraxians closed their borders to the Zephyrians. Ambassador Zethka spent his days staring at silent communication channels. Sometimes he would send messages into human space, hoping for any kind of response. "Please," he would say into the emptiness, "just tell us you're all right. Tell us what's happening." But only silence came back. The worst part was not knowing. If humans were in trouble, the galaxy could help. If they were angry about something, negotiations could begin. If they were planning something, preparations could be made. But the complete silence gave no clues about their intentions. 3 months after the silence began, Council Director Vox Prime called another emergency meeting. His ancient face looked more worried than anyone had ever seen it. "We have a problem," he announced. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected unusual movement in human territory. Large numbers of human ships are moving to positions throughout their space. We don't know why." The Thraxian delegate's tentacles curled with anxiety. "Moving where?" "Everywhere," Vox Prime replied. "They're spreading out through their entire territory, taking up positions near every major trade route, every strategic resource point, every communication relay." "Are they preparing for something?" asked the Altarian representative. "We don't know," Vox Prime said. "They won't tell us anything." Ambassador Zethka felt a chill run through his body. For months he had hoped the human silence was temporary, some kind of cultural experiment or religious observance that would eventually end. But this sounded different. This sounded like preparation. "What do we do?" asked the Kree delegate. Vox Prime's ancient eyes dimmed further. "We wait and we watch, and we hope that when humanity finally decides to speak again, they have something good to say." But deep in his heart, Zethka no longer believed they would speak again. The humans had found something beyond words, something that didn't require explanation or discussion. And that thought terrified him more than any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. The meeting ended in uncomfortable silence. As the ambassadors filed out of the chamber, Zethka noticed something that chilled him to his core. For the first time in his memory, the galaxy's representatives were leaving a meeting without talking to each other. The human silence was spreading, and no one knew how to stop it. That night, Zethka sat in his office, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, billions of humans were going about their lives without saying a word, and somehow that silence felt more threatening than any army the galaxy had ever seen. When humanity ceased talking, that was the day the war began. Commander Yala 9 had volunteered for the deep reconnaissance mission because she thought it would be simple. Go into human space, observe what the humans were doing, and report back to the Galactic Council. Easy work for someone with her military background and experience with first contact situations. She was wrong. The Joint Task Force consisted of representatives from 12 different species, all chosen for their expertise in dealing with unusual situations. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by 7 different civilizations working together. It carried the most advanced sensors in the galaxy and could analyze everything from atmospheric composition to brainwave patterns, but none of that preparation had readied them for what they found in human space. The first human system they entered looked normal from a distance. Ships moved between planets, space stations orbited in their usual patterns, and the energy signatures suggested normal levels of activity. But as they got closer, the strangeness became clear. "Look at the formation patterns," said Dr. Kextor, the mission's specialist in social behavior. He pointed at the main display, where dozens of human cargo ships were moving between planets. "They're flying in perfect coordination. No communication signals between them, but watch how they move." Yala 9 studied the display. The cargo ships weren't just following traffic patterns. They were moving like parts of a single organism. When one ship changed course slightly, others adjusted their paths without any visible communication. When a group of ships approached a space station, they formed a perfect spiral that allowed each vessel to dock in exactly the right sequence. "It's like they're all following the same plan," said Lieutenant Vex, the communications officer. "But we're not detecting any signals between them." "Try hailing them," Yala 9 ordered. Lieutenant Vex sent out standard greeting signals on all frequencies. The human ships didn't respond. They didn't even acknowledge that the signals existed. The cargo vessels continued their perfect dance around the space station as if the alien task force wasn't there. "Take us closer to that station," Yala 9 decided. As their ship approached the human space station, automated systems activated. A polite message appeared on their screens, but it wasn't spoken by any human voice. It was just text that appeared in perfect translations for all 12 species on board. Welcome, visitors. Please maintain safe distance. Docking facilities are not available at this time. That's it? Asked Dr. Kextor. No questions about who we are or what we want? Lieutenant Vex shook his head. The station's computers recognize us as non-human. They're treating us like tourists who wandered into the wrong area. They spent hours observing the station. Through their advanced sensors, they could see humans moving through the corridors, working at various tasks, living their lives. But something was fundamentally different about how they behaved. Dr. Kextor, Yala 9 called. What do you make of their body language? The behavioral specialist had been studying the sensor readings for the past hour. His expression was deeply troubled. This is unlike anything I've seen before. Watch this group of humans in what appears to be a meeting room. The display showed a dozen humans sitting around a table, but instead of talking, gesturing, or showing any of the usual signs of discussion, they simply looked at each other. Occasionally, one would nod slightly or make a small hand gesture. Then they would all get up and leave, apparently having reached some kind of agreement. How long did that meeting last? Asked Yala 9. 3 minutes and 47 seconds, Lieutenant Vex replied. In that time, they seemed to make decisions that would normally take hours of discussion. Over the following days, they visited system after system in human space. Everywhere they went, they found the same thing. Humans working with impossible efficiency, moving with perfect coordination, making decisions without any apparent discussion. But the most disturbing discovery came when they reached the Sol system, humanity's home. Earth looked busier than it had ever been. The planet's surface showed massive construction projects, new cities rising at impossible speeds, and industrial activity that seemed to have tripled since the silence began. But the strangest sight was the orbital space around Earth. How many ships are out there? Yala 9 asked. Lieutenant Vex ran the numbers. Over 10,000 vessels of various sizes. Military ships, cargo haulers, passenger transports, construction vessels. They're all just waiting. Waiting for what? Unknown. But they're not talking to each other, and they're not talking to us. Dr. Kextor had been studying the human behavior patterns for weeks now. His report to Commander Yala 9 was disturbing. I believe the humans have developed some form of shared consciousness, he explained. Not telepathy exactly, but something close to it. They seem to understand each other without needing to communicate in any way we can detect. Is that possible? Asked Yala 9. For most species, no. But humans have always been different. They're social in ways that other species aren't. Maybe they've just taken that social connection to its logical extreme. The task force tried everything they could think of to get the humans to respond. They sent messages in every language humans had ever used. They broadcast music, mathematical equations, and even recordings of human voices from before the silence began. Nothing worked, but the humans weren't ignoring them exactly. Sometimes when the alien ship passed close to a human vessel, people would look out the windows. They would watch the alien ship with what seemed like mild curiosity, the way someone might watch a bird fly past. Then they would return to their work without any sign that they considered the aliens important. It's like we've become irrelevant to them, reported Dr. Kextor. Not enemies, not friends, just not significant enough to acknowledge. The most frightening moment came when they tried to dock with a human space station. Their ship was allowed to attach to a docking port, and an airlock opened for them. A group of humans was waiting on the other side, but they didn't speak or gesture. They simply stood there looking at the aliens with patient expressions. Commander Yala 9 tried to communicate. She spoke in standard galactic, then in several human languages she knew. She gestured, pointed at herself, even tried drawing pictures on a tablet. The humans watched everything she did with polite attention, but they didn't respond in any way. After 30 minutes, one of the humans stepped forward and gently took Yala 9 by the arm. With careful, non-threatening movements, the human guided her back toward the airlock. The message was clear without any words being spoken. It was time for the aliens to leave. As their ship undocked from the station, Dr. Kextor made an observation that chilled everyone on board. Did you notice something about those humans we met? What? Asked Yala 9. They all moved at exactly the right moment. When one person stepped forward, The others stepped back to make room. When someone needed to pass through, others moved aside before being asked. It was like they all knew exactly what everyone else was going to do. Lieutenant Vex had been monitoring human communication frequencies the entire time they were docked. "I detected some very low-level electromagnetic activity," he reported. "Nothing like normal brain waves, but there was definitely some kind of synchronized pattern between all the humans in that area." "You think they're somehow connected?" "I think they're more connected than any species has ever been, and I think that connection is getting stronger." As the task force prepared to return to the Galactic Council, Commander Yala 9 realized that their mission had raised more questions than it had answered. The humans weren't just being quiet. They had fundamentally changed into something new, something that didn't need the chaos of individual voices and conflicting opinions. But the most disturbing question remained unanswered. What did humans plan to do with their new unity? On their final day in human space, they witnessed something that suggested an answer. A massive human fleet consisting of thousands of ships began moving out from the Sol system. The fleet moved in perfect formation, with each ship knowing exactly where to go and when to move. "Where are they heading?" asked Lieutenant Vex. Dr. Kextor checked the star charts. His face went pale. "Toward the galactic core, toward the most densely populated systems in the galaxy." Commander Yala 9 felt a chill run through her body. The humans were no longer content to stay in their own territory. They were moving outward, and their silence suggested they had no intention of asking permission for whatever they planned to do. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, heading back to the Galactic Council with their report, Yala 9 wondered if they were already too late to warn the galaxy about what humanity had become. When humanity ceased talking, that was the day the war began. Archivist Quindel had spent 400 years studying the histories of extinct civilizations. Her job at the Galactic Archives was to catalog the rise and fall of species that had once ruled the stars, but were now nothing more than ruins and legends. It was peaceful work, far removed from the politics and conflicts of the living galaxy. But when Commander Yala 9's report reached the Galactic Council, everything changed. "Find anything you can about species that stopped communicating," Council Director Vox Prime had ordered. "Look through every archive, every legend, every fragment of ancient text. If this has happened before, we need to know." Quindel had thought it would be a simple search. In her centuries of work, she had never encountered a species that voluntarily gave up communication. But as she dug deeper into the oldest archives, she began to find disturbing patterns. The first reference was in the records of the HFY Empire, a civilization that had fallen 12,000 years ago. Their final historical entry mentioned a species they called the Silent Builders. According to the fragmentary text, these beings had once been chattering and loud like nest birds, but had suddenly learned to speak with one voice by speaking with no voice. The entry was brief and mostly illegible, but it described a species that moved with perfect coordination and built structures that defied understanding. The Zelthrans had considered them a curiosity until the Silent Builders had quietly taken control of 3 star systems without firing a shot. They simply arrived and began working, the ancient text read. "We asked them what they wanted, but they did not answer. We demanded they leave, but they ignored us. When we tried to fight them, we discovered they had prepared for everything we might do. It was as if they could see the future." Quindel felt a chill as she read those words. The description sounded too much like what was happening with humanity. She searched deeper, following references from one extinct civilization to another. The Mordak Confederacy had records of the Quiet Ones, a species that had learned to think as one mind in many bodies. The Vorthan Republic mentioned the Wordless, who had achieved perfect understanding by abandoning the chaos of individual thought. But the most detailed account came from the Archives of the Eternal Dominion, a vast empire that had ruled the galaxy's core regions 15,000 years ago. Their records described a species called the Synarxi, and the description made Quindel's hands shake as she read it. The Synarxi were once known for their endless debates and chaotic decision-making processes, the ancient text explained. They would argue for days about the smallest matters and seemed incapable of unified action. Other species considered them harmless because of their inability to agree on anything. Then, without warning, the argument stopped. The Synarxi became silent, not just to other species, but to each other. They moved with purpose that no individual mind could have conceived. They built projects that required coordination across thousands of worlds. They achieved perfect unity by abandoning the weakness of individual expression. The account went on to describe how the Synarchy had quietly taken control of trade routes, resource systems, and strategic positions throughout the galaxy. They never declared war or made demands. They simply moved into position and began reshaping galactic civilization to their needs. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. The text continued. They had prepared for every response we might make. Our fleets found empty space where they expected to find enemies. Our diplomats spoke to silence. Our spies discovered nothing because there were no plans to discover. The Synarchy moved as one organism, and each part knew its role without being told. The Eternal Dominion had fought a war against the Synarchy that lasted 300 years. It was a war unlike any other, fought against an enemy that never spoke, never negotiated, and never explained their actions. The Synarchy simply continued their reshaping of the galaxy with patient, methodical determination. The war ended when the Synarchy achieved what they had been working toward all along: complete galactic unity under their guidance. The other species weren't destroyed or enslaved. They were simply integrated into a new order, where the Synarchy made all the important decisions, and everyone else followed their lead. They rule not through force but through inevitability, the final entry read. They see the shape of the future and move to make it real. Resistance is possible but pointless, like trying to argue with gravity or negotiate with time. Quindel found similar accounts in the archives of dozens of extinct civilizations. Always the same pattern: a chaotic, argumentative species that suddenly achieved perfect unity by abandoning individual communication. Always the same result: the quiet reshaping of galactic civilization under their guidance. But there was something else in the ancient texts that made her blood freeze. The descriptions of these silent species weren't describing different civilizations. The physical characteristics, the behavioral patterns, the methods of achieving unity, they were all describing the same species at different points in galactic history. The silent builders, the quiet ones, the wordless, the Synarchy, they were all humanity. Quindel's research revealed a terrifying pattern. Every 50 to 100,000 years, humanity would emerge in the galaxy as a young, chaotic species full of debates and conflicts. Other civilizations would consider them useful but ultimately harmless because of their inability to achieve unity. Then, at some point in their development, humans would stop talking. They would achieve perfect coordination and begin the patient process of reshaping galactic civilization. This would continue for thousands of years until some unknown event would cause them to lose their unity and return to their chaotic, individual state. The cycle had repeated at least 7 times in recorded galactic history. Each time, the existing civilizations would eventually fall or fade away, to be replaced by new species who would eventually encounter humanity's next emergence. As Quindel compiled her findings, she realized something that filled her with dread. According to the historical pattern, humanity was right on schedule for their next transformation. The signs had all been there: their rapid spread across the galaxy, their role as connectors and communicators, their apparent inability to achieve lasting unity despite their obvious potential. But this time was different. This time, the galactic civilizations knew what was happening. The ancient texts had been preserved and the pattern had been identified. For the first time in history, the galaxy might be able to prepare for humanity's transformation. Quindel rushed her findings to the Galactic Council. The emergency session that followed was unlike anything in the Council's history. Representatives from every major species gathered to hear the impossible truth about humanity's nature. Council Director Vox Prime read the report in his ancient, rumbling voice. The chamber grew quieter with each revelation. By the time he finished, the silence was so complete that Quindel could hear the ventilation systems humming. "Are you certain of these findings?" Vox Prime asked. "The evidence is overwhelming," Quindel replied. "Humanity is not a young species having a cultural crisis. They are the galaxy's oldest species entering their next phase of dominance." The Thraxian delegate's tentacles were completely still, a sign of extreme distress in her species. "You're saying this has happened before?" "Many times? At least 7 previous cycles," Quindel confirmed. "Each time, humanity achieves perfect unity and gradually takes control of galactic civilization. The process takes thousands of years, but it appears to be inevitable. What happened to the species that resisted? Asked the Altarian representative. Quindel had been dreading that question. According to the records, resistance was possible but ultimately unsuccessful. Species that fought against humanity's expansion were gradually worn down and absorbed into the new galactic order, not through conquest but through integration. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter, but it quickly died down as the full implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just stopped talking to other species. They had begun the process of reshaping the galaxy once again, just as they had done many times before. But this time, the galaxy knew what was coming. The question was whether that knowledge would be enough to change the outcome, or if humanity's latest transformation was already too advanced to stop. As the council session ended in uncomfortable silence, Quindel reflected on something she had found in the oldest archives, a single line, repeated in the records of multiple extinct civilizations. When the humans stop talking, the age of change begins. Looking around at the worried faces of the galactic representatives, Quindel realized that this age of change had already begun. The only question now was what form it would take.